Welcome back to the broadcast. If you're just joining us, you're watching Newsline here on KTN News, where the news comes first. And let's get into that conversation now. In the clamor for constitutional reforms through the Building Bridges initiative, BBI has taken a rather interesting twist, courtesy of the coronavirus pandemic. Kakamega Governor, who is also the ODM Deputy Party Leader, Wycliffe Ambetsa Oparanya, now says that it is no longer tenable for the country to hold a constitutional referendum before the 2022 general election. Oparanya intimating that the harsh economic times brought about by the COVID-19 containment measures make a referendum unjustifiable, and that money set aside for the BBI should be used to fight coronavirus. Listen.
We move nearer to the election. I think it is not tenable. It's not going to be tenable. Because you can't have, a referendum is just like a general election. The expenses involved are heavy, so you have another general election because everybody is voting. Then in another 12 months, you are now going for another election. I don't think with the dates we have, it is going to be tenable. You will just use COVID as an excuse. Yeah, because instead of going for other loans to deal with COVID, let them defer so that you have liquidity. Otherwise, if you go for other loans, you are just now overcommitting yourself. So, but if they defer, and some of that money we used to fight COVID, and some used to ease the cash flow, especially in counties, that will be a better arrangement.
All right, I want to start there with the words, their remarks from the ODM Deputy Party Leader, the Kakamega Governor there. Let me bring in my panelists into the show tonight. I have with me Professor Gitile Naitule, governance expert. I'm also joined in studio tonight by public policy analyst Ruben Kigame, joining us live from the county of Uasin Gishu in Eldoret, and also joining us from right here in the capital is political analyst and lawyer Dunstan Omari. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. Let me begin with you, Dunstan. What we are hearing there from the Kakamega Governor, it is an interesting remark from an ODM Deputy Party Leader. We haven't heard from the Party Leader himself for a number of days now. Of course, he was taken ill a few days ago. What is your initial reaction to those remarks from Wycliffe Oparanya?
Thank you, viewers, for KTN News, and thank you, Ben, for inviting me to this show. One, Oparanya is not an ordinary citizen. We know very well Oparanya is the deputy head of ODM. ODM leader is unwell, and therefore he must have handed over power temporarily to Oparanya. Therefore, Oparanya is talking and a substantive head of ODM. Two, Oparanya has just left to be the former governor, the former chairman of the Council of Governors. For the last 2 years, Oparanya has been dealing with all the counties. He knows what he's talking about. Third, Oparanya is a former cabinet minister in charge of planning. He understands the planning aspect, the financial aspect of running a referendum. And therefore, when Oparanya talks, it is not something that can be taken for granted. In my view, and this has been always the reality, that President Uhuru Kenyatta was never, has never, and will never be ready for what we call the BBI. The BBI was not a project of President Uhuru Kenyatta. The President Uhuru Kenyatta's project was the handshake. The handshake to tame, and not to tame, but to get the legitimacy that the right Prime Minister denied him by being sworn in as the people's president. Mm-hmm. He got that legitimacy. The Prime Minister Babel sneaked in the concept of BBI, that because I've given you legitimacy, we have now to amend the Constitution, which will give me the motivation, which will give me the speed to which I will use to get power 2022. President Uhuru Kenyatta has come out very clearly that there were no discussions about 2022. What they discussed was the handshake and the BBI. Therefore, what Oparanya is saying, they are looking for a way to get out of the mess ODM has found themselves and to go away from the reality that the third wave of COVID has made the government called Jubilee Wing of Kieleweke and ODM to be very, very unpopular to Kenyans. When Kenyans are dying, when Kenyans' economy is collapsing, when jobs are going, when the lockdown is biting, Baba and Uhuru Kenyatta.
So those things are more important than the BBI, you say. All right. Let me bring Prof into the conversation. Prof, what is your analysis of this situation before we get into the question, trying to answer the question whether COVID is, temporarily or gradually stopping reggae? What is your reaction to these remarks by the ODM deputy leader?
I think a lot of Kenyans will feel relieved, actually, by not having a referendum just 1 year to the election. But BBI was already facing serious legal challenges if the courts were to be taken seriously or were to take the BBI process seriously. The process was initiated by the executive, like Omar says, I guess, to give Raila something. That's illegal. The Constitution allows only 2 ways with which you change it. Through a parliamentary initiative, which now the executive can filter in, or through public initiative. Now, if you are taking the public initiative routes, then you cannot use public money, you can't use the chiefs, you can't do all the things they have done with the BBI. So that's the illegality right now there. The other thing is that when you look at the amendments being made by BBI, they are changing the architecture, the basic DNA of the Constitution. We have a pure presidential system. The amendments establishing an iron-brained system where cabinet sits in parliament, that is changing the DNA. You can't change the DNA of the Constitution without replacing it. So again, that's an illegality right there. Now, when you look at what was the whole idea about the handshake, was actually to deal with electoral justice. That seemed to have been completely forgotten. Now, having said that, let me say, sometimes we behave like some classical 1848 book called The Roast Pig Syndrome, where the Chinese used to, children set house on fire, they roasted the pig, they never used to eat cooked meat. So for the first time they tasted the meat, it was nice. From that time, every time they wanted to eat a roast pig, they would put the pig in the house and send the house on fire. Every time we have an electoral process, we want to change the Constitution. The Constitution has nothing to do with how we manage ourselves, how we manage our electoral process. So we need to zero in on the processes and the procedures with which we elect the leaders, but not changing the document. So this is a relief to a lot of people who saw that there's a confusion coming and the country needs stability. And this confusion was going to bring stability. So if you ODM within rows, then the whole thing collapses, and then that's better for Kenya.
All right. Thanks for those remarks. Let's bring in Ruben Kigame joining us from the county of Uasin Gishu. We have seen you are a supporter of the Linda Katiba group, which is aggressively opposed to the BBI process. When you hear such remarks from pro-BBI politicians, you welcome them with open arms, don't you?
Well, we're not surprised, first of all, because if you institute a process that is faulty on the basis of priority, the process itself is faulty, you will certainly fail. And so the common man has been vindicated. If you remember last year, we came out saying that our priorities are completely reversed. And we were also afraid that before we implement the entire Constitution, we were already amending it, hardly 10 years from when we implemented it.
Right.
And so I think it's also proving just who the politician is. There is a difference between someone who is a politician and someone who is a leader, and we must never confuse the two. So what we've been having is a lot of heckling-based discussions, a lot of acclamation, and a process of reggae that has not been thought through. And as long as you violate any principle of law or order or priority, you'll get it wrong. May I add, as a representative of persons living with disability, here in my hands I have the 2010 Constitution. This is in Braille. Now, I felt very included in the process. Now, with the BBI, in terms of public participation, I can tell you for sure a lot of people from my constituency have never seen the document. They have no idea what is in it. I can read it online myself, but not everybody has a computer. Lastly, we also mentioned those of us that I represent from the religious circle that, you know what, when a country becomes unheeding to advice or counsel of people in the church, people in the mosques, and so on, they will be defeated. So we resorted to praying. We actually had a very long prayer time since December, asking God, would you please scatter the process? And, like Jesus would say, however, not our will, but your will be done. So if he has scattered it, we feel vindicated spiritually too, and I'm very happy.
All right, thank you. Prof, if I can ask you this, do you think it is the COVID-19 situation in the country following the new measures announced by the President on Friday that are helping shape this conversation to the way of those who are opposed to it, rather than, or do you think it is a calculated process?
I think it's a calculated process. The government has incredible amount of resources to gather information and get the feeling of Kenyans out there. And also, the government has an interest in a stable state. So they realized that this process was going to stabilize basically the country. And because of that, I feel that the COVID situation maybe has come to assist so that they can give them an escape route. But you see, it looked mean. It looked callous for the state or leaders basically to insist on BBI when people are having COVID issues, when the economy is collapsing. And so generally they were unpopular, and I think they have come to appreciate that. The problem with the Kenyan politician is that even if you put the facts right in front of their eyes, sometimes they choose not to see them. And somehow why they are now seeing them is because I think there has been differences of procedure on how to deal with the BBI. I think there are people within the government who felt that there are things in the BBI that can be legislated. And I think they were proposing to legislate those and leave the ones for the referendum later, and the ODM didn't like that. So ODM now is finding a way, probably on getting out of the mess, if I were to use that word. Because I think the process has been messy from day one. You can't inject a constitutionally mandated body like INBC function and move them to a committee. I'm talking about delineation of constituent boundaries. That is given by a constitution that we have not repealed. So a committee cannot be formed and then propose or basically pretend to now assume those powers, which it has not been given by us, and then go ahead and delineate boundaries. I think there is a lot of legal lacuna in that document, and I think the sooner they get away from it, the better for the country.
All right, let me come to you, Dunstan. There's a statement there by the governor of the county of Migori, Okoth Obado, also echoing some of those sentiments by his Kakamega counterpart, saying, let me just quote a very brief part, "We are facing difficulties in this country, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. We are facing increased prices of basic commodities, and life has become so unbearable. Therefore, claims that BBI will improve our lives is a very big lie." Now, when you read comments by Kenyans, especially on social media, and of course, when you talk to Kenyans, they seem to be very worried about, you know, their immediate well-being in terms of their economic well-being and their health as well. What we are seeing from these pro-BBI politicians is merely a drop in the ocean when you consider the bigger chunk of the political class in this country, you know, support the BBI process. So what happens now? Because these gentlemen seem to be setting an agenda that is resonating with the people. So what happens to the rest of the BBI brigade?
Ben, what is very clear, politicians are able to read the mood. Politicians are able to lit fires and run away from those fires and say they were never part of the process. Oparanya is realizing that unless he's relevant with his Mulembe nation, he's lost touch with the people. Obado is now talking. What they given these mouths today, Kenyans have rejected the BBI from inception. Number two, the reality, Ben, I'm telling you, and every Kenyan should take this advice to the bank, is that COVID-19 is a constant. It will determine who becomes the president 2022. It will determine the death or the resurrection or the continuity of BBI. Very many politicians will die. It's unfortunate. As many Kenyans are dying, until COVID is contained, within the numbers, the Minister for Health announces politicians will be inside. Serious stakeholders in the BBI, serious people who drive the political agenda in this country will be among those numbers. Therefore, BBI is a constant. Already, it has dragged the BBI reggae song to a limbo. Is it technical? No. Is it that numbers are being generated to justify the lockdown and the close of parliament? No. The reality everybody is seeing, everybody is telling you he knows a relative, a friend, a colleague who has died of COVID. So COVID is going to determine the future. When COVID struck, Baba, the dynamics have changed. And we are seeing the element of vaccination. The question of COVID ceased from being a medical question. It is a political question, and it is a succession question. Two, what about the courts? The totality, I'm a constitutional lawyer. The BBI is an illegality that will be declared so by the judges. The processes were flawed. The outcome is flawed. The courts are a problem. Is President Uhuru Kenyatta looking at that dilemma and saying, then the best way to do with it is to avoid the judgment of the 5 judges? The judges are going to pronounce themselves. I wouldn't want to preempt what the judges are going to say, but any lawyer, whether first-year student of law, will tell you the threshold and the constitutionality of the process is totally arbitrary. It will not see the light of the day. Thirdly, the referendum is a nightmare to the promoters of BBI. They bribe the MCAs. I wouldn't have qualification for that. There is rumor they bribe the MCAs with a car loan. How true it is, I don't know. But there's a general perception that MCAs were either forced, coerced or they were induced and they voted that. They have reached in Parliament. Parliament has become the hardest nut to crack. Parliament is saying they must open the BBI and do amendments to it. And that story seems to be bringing together a large chunk of parliamentarians. Remember, the argument was, once the train has left the station, you can't change, you can't put a comma, you can't do anything. We are seeing the likes of the doyen of the law, Senator Orengo, saying, we cannot be a rubber stamp. We must interpret Article 256 and 257 of the Constitution and the jurisdiction and powers of Parliament cannot be a rubber stamp.
All right.
That, and lastly, Ben, the question we are saying, everybody is worried about the referendum. If this document is put to a referendum and it fails, what will be the legacy of Baba and what will be the legacy of the... We have heard from my friend there, is telling you the role of the church. A country that does not listen to the voice of the church is a country that does not flourish. Did BBI ignore the voice of the church and the church went to pray and the prayers have come? Miracles, I'm not one of them, but we can see the direction this thing is going. Ben, things are becoming hotter in the kitchen of the BBI.
All right. Prof. Johnson says the chickens are coming home to roost when he says that that the COVID-19 will determine 2022 politics. Do you agree? I
do. I really agree because when you look at the steps we have taken now, for example, to contain it, we didn't think very carefully the impact. The steps are good, and they are welcome to the country. But I think there are ways they could have taken to reduce the pain. You see, when you look at our system, most employment is in these bars and these hotels. 99% of the people working there are single mothers. And these people get like 300 shillings per day. That's what they feed their family. That's what they pay rent to. The day they have not worked, they don't get paid. So we need to think on how to cushion these people. So I think maintaining the curfew at the level where it was, closing the bars at 8 o'clock and even the hotels may have had the same impact and reduce the infection, but maintain these people at work, at the workplace. Now, why am I saying that? Because this is generating a lot of anger down there. And that anger will find expression in the voting. So I think Omar is right, that BBI, in the end, we will actually choose the next president. Of course, the situation may change because the anger is directed against the decision makers right now. But in the event that we have other people coming into the race who are not currently executing decisions, so that may change. But as it is right now, Omar is right, it's a big, big issue, the BBI for the voter. It's an issue for, the COVID-19 is a big issue for the voter, and it will determine to ambiguous who will become the president.
Let's go back to Ruben Kigame. Mr. Kigame, you say that you are not surprised by how things are turning out. What about Kenyans who support the BBI process? There are millions of them. At the very least, we know some more than 4 million who appended their signatures to that BBI document. How do they come into this conversation at this particular time in this country?
Okay, before I answer your question, please allow me the freedom to also respond to the question of COVID-19, which you denied me. So very quickly,
we'll get into it in more details, but go on.
Okay, you want me to comment on COVID-19 or on the other question?
Yes, you can go ahead. Comment on both.
Okay, so COVID-19 is a real test And it's a test at the level of observance of the law. It's also a test on what life is all about, and it's also a test on governance. So first of all, on the issue of the law, right from last year, if you watch the way politicians have handled COVID-19, they have behaved as if it doesn't exist. So they would tell us it does, be careful, but they themselves were not observing anything to do with COVID-19. You remember the rallies, no social distancing, and so on. So you cannot tell wananchi to observe those protocols and you yourself are breaking them everywhere. It doesn't work in leadership. It will not work. And that's why some people still do not wear masks, because they say our leaders don't observe these things. Now, the other thing is double standards that are observable everywhere. If you can have people crowding on the SGR and you know, on the aircraft, you're seated very closely together, but then you tell matatus to social distance and carry 7 people, then you look like you're oppressing the people that are down here. So those who can fly, those who can take the SGR, you say, you know, so different standards. And so what has happened is that they have realized they cannot have the rallies. Of course, they counted on moving around the country so that they can popularize BBI. It didn't work, and it won't work. So I guess they can retreat. The second thing is about equalization, that we are all under a common life principle. We all go to the toilet, we all eat, yes, but we all die. And so we've been telling the politicians for years that you're not made of another substance, but they're not listening. So they thought they can socialize, and so we all die. And we need to recognize that life is short, and some of the decisions we make will outlive us. So I think COVID is a very wonderful equalizer, and I agree with the gentleman. It may very well determine who becomes president, you know, whether by life or otherwise, or sheer opportunities or just disadvantages. The last thing I wanted to focus on is just how our country in managing COVID-19 has demonstrated that they mind the interests of a few, but they don't think about the ordinary person. So if you set up a curfew or you come up with a kind of regulations like the president did on Friday, without thinking about the consequences of what you've just said, either your advisors are not good, so they don't give you good advice, or you don't think through all the way, or you can't veto, or all of the above. But for the government spokesman to then come up later and say, no, this is what we meant, we can extend this to Sunday, another to Monday, it means the government is unable to lead, it's unable to think through these processes, and it's an indicator of where we stand as citizens with regard to leadership.
All right, tell me this, Mr. Kigame. I'd also asked you, what do you think will happen to Kenyans who support the BBI process, even though there is another side of them, of the population that thinks it is not very important? They call it BBI nonsense. What about the other parts, millions of them that support the process?
So the question here, Ben, the question is, who are these Kenyans that support BBI? We're not saying they are not there, but if you just went by the gathering of the signatures, you already know that it was a flawed process. You know that government machinery was involved in procuring those signatures. You know that some people were told, if you don't sign this document, then you won't have the kazi kwa vijana. Some people were told, you know, the chiefs were told, you know, ni kazi ya serikali wewe fanya. So a lot of government machinery was involved in coercing people to look like they support the process. And so if you coerce a people into a process, of course it will not work. And so there may be beneficiaries of the system that say, let's have BBI, let's move to the referendum. But the voices on the ground, you know, the letters that leaked in Parliament, all these were indicators that, you know, down on the ground, people are not with you. And I'll just give an example of a bus that takes off with a bad tire. And they tell you, you know, there is a problem with this bus. If you keep saying, let's just go, of course you will have to stop somewhere. This is what is happening. So you don't even have to go to faith to be able to determine that BBI was a failure from the start.
All right. Prof, President Uhuru Kenyatta is a stakeholder in this BBI process. If you were to talk to him tonight, what would you tell him? Reading the mood of the country, from what we are seeing, some of the other pro-BBI politicians now coming out to say.
The president is a very reasonable man. I can tell you, given I've been watching his doings with the BBI, I wouldn't think his heart hasn't been there from the very beginning. And I think he understands the mood of the country. And he will be very happy when ODM brought out, because I think they have been pushing him. You know, there are people who just have a good personality, and the president is one of those people. But after the handshake, I think he felt indebted, and he went along with a process which was frowned up in issue, like the speakers in this show have said. So I think he should be very happy if UNDM withdraws from it, because it will rob him, hold his end of the bargain. In other words, it will assist him to say that, look, I was with you all the way, but this thing didn't work. I'm not so sure if the president wanted this thing to work. If he wanted this thing to work, he would never use the chiefs to collect signatures. He would never use government machinery to push BBI, because he knows the courts, if they are serious, they will inject that process. The Articles 256 and 257, why the parliament is supposed not to change anything, those articles were put there to protect the public. When the public want to change the constitution, they were put to make sure that the parliament does not then interfere and defeat the will of the people. That's the idea. What they are grappling with now is a process which is executive driven. That is why they are debating now, should we be a rubber stamp, should we not be a rubber stamp? But the truth is, those articles are good. They are supposed to protect a genuine public initiative from being tampered with by Parliament.
All right. We'll get into Parliament later on. Dunstan, we saw earlier on, a few weeks ago, the ODM party coming out to, decrying what they called a hand of some top Uhuru men inside Harambee House of, meddling with the BBI process and trying to get in the way of the ODM leader Raila Odinga in the 2022 election, process. Do you see this being a part of that, what we are seeing now? Is it chickens coming home to roost, and ODM suffering from failing to separate 2022 politics from BBI politics?
Ben, ODM was alive in 2007. ODM was alive in 2013. In 2013, their party leader, Babel, was a prime minister. He made the same utterances. My good two senior lawyers, Orengol and the other member of parliament, made that ODM, that the BBI is being blackmailed by technocrats.
Right.
The same technocrats in 2017 who edged out Baba because he was an incumbent. He lost, and the election went to Uhuru Kenyatta. The same story, they should listen to this chicken seller, William Ruto, the wheelbarrow man. The wheelbarrow man started complaining of Kibichu. The wheelbarrow man started complaining of Matiang'i. The wheelbarrow man started complaining of Murade. And at the first time when they made the noise, they sacked. President Uhuru Kenyatta sacked Murade. is Murathe back at Jubilee, still more lethal and powerful. Kibicho and Matiang'i ran away from the appearance that they are the ones who had withdrawn the deputy president's security. And the president appeared by body language that he was not with them. What happened? The story proceeded. Today is a government policy that no cabinet minister, nobody in government wants to touch the chicken man, because the wheelbarrow man seems to have had political leprosy. This now comes to Babel. His people have started again making the noise the wheelbarrow man made, attacking the same people, the same Kibicho, the same Matiang'i, the same Murathe, the same president's men. Are these president's men acting without direct instructions from President Uhuru Kenyatta? No. Is President Uhuru Kenyatta in charge of this government and all that runs? The president has affirmed that. That is the commander-in-chief. He's the one in charge of government and he controls whatever happens. Therefore, if BBI office has been closed and it has been taken to Harambee House, whose office is at Harambee House? President Uhuru Kenyatta's office. Who are the people who are allegedly sabotaging BBI? They are appointees of the president. And they have affirmed it very clearly that they are only loyal to the appointing authority, being the president of the republic. Therefore, anything we are seeing is not by an accident. Ben and Kenyans, the president and professors put it very clearly, the president is in control of NSIS. The president is in control of the military intelligence. The president is in control of all disciplined forces in this country. The president is still in control of what we wanted to abolish, the famous or infamous provincial administration, which listens to everybody's bedroom. As we talk then, the provincial administration's ears and the NSI's ears are in everybody's bedroom. The president is properly briefed. Any move we see is not by an accident. Any move we see is not informed by intelligence, by data, by analysis. The president's advisors are hundreds.
So the head of state knows, is what you're saying, this Danson. So tell me this very quickly, because all these things we are seeing, and we're seeing them from the political class, has culminated into the politics that we are seeing playing out today. We are seeing alignments and political alliances being formed left, right, and center. And there has been a theory that the former prime minister and the deputy president are being isolated. And there has been talk, gossip, rumors of a political alliance between the two of them. In your opinion, do you think that would work? Very quickly.
What will happen will be like a replica of 2002. President Uhuru Kenyatta will hand over the baton to Gideon Moi. Hate it, love it. There is a debt. There is a debt where Gideon Moi's father was instructed by President Uhuru Kenyatta's father, and he chose President Uhuru Kenyatta, and he knew very well he will not succeed. That will trigger something that will look like an alliance between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, which will not work. It will be an alliance like the one of Matiba and the Jaramogi Oginga that collapsed. And who will benefit? William Ruto will run with a few votes. Baba will run with a few votes. The president's candidate, if he is supported by what the others are abusing and calling them Cerelac people, they might stick. Between William Ruto and Raila Odinga, Ben, who will play second fiddle? The law does not allow William Ruto to be on the ballot as a deputy president. He can only be a president. BBI has died. The positions being created for prime ministers are not there. Oparanya said it. Therefore, William Ruto has only one bullet to go, lose, and go 2027 and 2032, and still even 2037. Raila Odinga has this last miraculous bullet that the BBI has given him. He must be in the ballot. So the question of them working together, forget about it.
All right.
And if they play the direction they are going, that each will be in the ballot,
yes,
the greatest beneficiary who will be laughing to State House will be Gideon Moi.
All right. Thank you for that. That is the prediction of Danson Omar. Prof, what do you say to that?
I think we are reading too much into the alliances because they're going to come. I think the candidates who may actually pull this country through have not even declared. I'm looking at the people who have not been actively out there. For example, the other day, the Speaker of the National Assembly was being crowned by Njorin Cheke in Imero as the Mount Kenya spokesperson.
Right.
The Speaker coming from the smallest tribe in the country, Mbere, the Speaker coming from Mount Kenya East, that wouldn't be a force. But right now, we can't see him because we are talking about Raila, we are talking about Ruto. It's too early. That's what I'm saying. So I think people need to relax. The clean candidates, because this country is dying for a clean, non-corrupt, non-politician, so that we can get a manager Kibaki style. They're dying for that. So people should hold their horses, relax about Raila, relax about Ruto. We wait for the alliances to form. We wait for the alliances to pronounce themselves to the country, and then by February next year, you can make a very accurate prediction.
All right. I didn't want us to get into real raw politics tonight, but we have gotten into it. Before we talk about, before I get your remarks quickly, gentlemen, about the COVID-19 measures announced by the president last week, let me come to you, Mr. Kigame, for a minute there. Since we were in the politics talk, do you think politicians in this country listen to what the clergy has to say?
They listen when they see the numbers, and then they forget as soon as they leave. But there are leaders that have been speaking to them, but they don't listen. I think even as late as when he was leaving office, the last bishop we had in Sitam, Dr. Bishop Oginde, actually gave a very open advice to the president when he was leaving office. He says, Mr. President, the bus has left, the train has left, but it has left many of us behind. They were not listening. But allow me to just comment very quickly on where we are in view of what my colleagues there have said. There are two main things I would like to focus on. And one is that the handshake was a mysterium of an act that nobody understood where it was coming from or where it was going. Ostensibly, it was supposed to secure us peace, but what really caused our peacelessness, what caused us to fight, I think it was basically because Raila felt that he had been robbed in his position. He had won, and he didn't get the seat. But you see, that was suspended in the handshake. Now, until we find an answer to that one, I don't think Raila will be at peace, and neither will his cronies be. However, let me be a little benevolent on Raila and Orengo and the ODM fraternity, because I supported them for a very long time. And it's because they stood for democracy, fighting for the common mwananchi. Now, I do not know what happened because they ended up killing the opposition. And any democratic system without an opposition will not move democratically. You will land into autocracy. And so when you have autocracy, the question is who calls the shots? So that's the problem. Now, the second thing is this. Our constitution mandates the citizens as the employers of all of these politicians and the so-called leaders. The problem is they do not listen to wananchi. And even if they read the mood of the country, they still think they can have a round-table meeting and agree and share power or situations together and neglect the common mwananchi. So here's my message. As long as you neglect the people who elected you, you are going nowhere. You're actually going, you don't have a blessing, you can't move forward. And so my advice would be for every politician listening today, now, if COVID will not take you out of office, then you need to know that, Kenya's citizens have moved on. And so, like Professor was saying, there is certainly an unspoken alliance of tired Kenyans that I'm sure we are going to see pretty much very, very shortly. In fact, that is the wing I belong to. I belong to those tired Kenyans that want to see change without the current alliances. These alliances will come and go. By the way, there's no shortage of alliances. Tomorrow another one will come up. So a political party, an alliance, and so on is not the answer. And if people are looking for power in 2022, guess what? They'll be confronted by these same problems that we are facing now. So the answer is the question is, how do you attend to what bedevils us now? How do you handle the rot in this country? How do you deal with corruption? Those are the issues Mwananchi wants to hear about. How do I put food on the table? Even as you lock up a country, how am I going to eat? How am I going to get home? These are just some of the things that our politicians think. You can sit at a hotel, you can sit, in State House and make decisions. No, you will not succeed this time. We have moved on. The ground has moved on. And there will be another unspoken alliance coming.
All right. All right. A lot of focus and spotlight there on ODM and Raila Odinga being accused of moving from a left wing to the center and to the right. And a lot of this also coming because of the COVID-19 situation, the measures announced by the president on Friday last week. The question we are seeking to provide an answer to for Kenyans is whether COVID has inadvertently stopped the reg. And today, Parliament suspended its ordinary sittings for at least 40 days amidst the third wave of coronavirus. The National Assembly will resume the plenary sittings on May 4th this year, while the Senate sittings resume on May 11th. However, members agreed that all select committees of the House shall continue holding meetings on virtual platforms and, where necessary, revert to in-person meetings in strict compliance with COVID-19 protocols. Let's listen.
Reports coming from the leadership of this parliament is that some of us, a good number of our members, have been affected. And that is true, that is factual. Some are actually fighting for their lives. We cannot just disclose names of members of parliament. And it is true, and there is no shame about this disease, really. And we must know that we are not isolated. We are not immune. We are not ring-fenced from the disease.
We may be culpable when it comes to being super spreaders. You've seen the rallies we've had. You've seen the number of times we have ignored the basic protocols. Therefore, we should not stand here today now because we've been asked to go on recess and say we must be here and to recall the powers and privileges of this House.
Our Constitution contemplates that even in the most difficult times, if there's one body that should sit, it is Parliament. Yes. That is why even the powers of the President to declare an emergency requires parliamentary approval after 14 days, and not by a small majority. It requires first 2/3 to extend it by 2 months. And if you need to extend it again, now it requires 3/4. It was contemplated that even in difficult times, Parliament would need to sit.
So ordinary sittings in the National Assembly suspended at least until May 4th, in the Senate until May 11th. This affects some of the timelines and roadmaps that we are seeing, especially with the BBI. There's some things Parliament was supposed to action its part by the 5th of next month, the 5th of April. Committees will continue to hold meetings virtually, so we'll continue to follow that and see how that plays out. But very quickly, gentlemen, to your views on the President's protocols, what has been called Public Order Number 2. Prof, was the President right to lock down those 5 counties?
I have to say yes, the President was right to lock down the counties, but I have an issue.
All right, Prof, let me interrupt you a bit as we try to fix your audio. Dunstan, what's your take on the President's Public Order Number 2, the lockdown on the 5 county zone, and of course the curfew and all that, and then the ban on rallies and everything?
The President's executive order was informed and misinformed. It was informed, and I accept with him, because the COVID surge has become very dangerous. The President had to intervene. The manner in which he intervened is where the problem is, because he never looked at the question of the livelihoods. He only looked at the question of preserving life. He never provided for a mechanism, a medical mechanism, a financial mechanism on how to mitigate the effects of his orders. And that is why it has never happened anywhere in the world, but it has happened in this country. The President's executive order that said the curfew takes effect at midnight that day. General Guna, a very junior officer, varied the President's orders, which tells you that there's a lot of problem within Harambee House. Is the President listening, or is the President acting without listening? There was no notice, and that is why Oguna had to review. Number 2, we have a problem. Kagwe is saying we do not have oxygen masks. What is the army doing? We have seen the army come out to deal with the Nairobi NMS. We have seen the army building railways. What is the role of the KDF in this COVID, which is both a medical and national security question? Could the army come and provide those gas cylinders so that people are safe? Number 2, we have seen what Mutua has done in Machakos. He has provided for a stimulus. Every time in America, there is a stimulus. The first time COVID came in, the President gave a national stimulus. I have seen just now on KTN News at 9, a very small clip that the central bank is ready and willing to provide a stimulus after they have assessed the effect of the lockdown, which is a PR exercise and which is supposed to have been done and was announced on that day. Are we not getting it right?
All right.
The vaccination, we have been told as of now, is around 135,000 people. We are not getting updates on daily basis. The way we are getting deaths and infections, what is hard for the government to provide the data on people being vaccinated today? Why did government take so long to get the President and his cabinet to be vaccinated and the chicken man to be vaccinated today? And we have seen outside, after the leaders were vaccinated, everybody has gone for vaccination. Are our leaders aware of what the public needs? I think the manner in which the President's executive order number 2 was spelled out was not based on any scientific basis. And it is likely, and that's why probably the president has said, these measures will have no timeline. Is he likely to revoke those measures tomorrow? How does an investor deal with a blanket order that says, till further notice? Will it be for the whole year? What was wrong for the president to give timelines and say,
all right,
these orders will last for 2 weeks, so subject to review?
All right, so the president saying the government is more worried about loss of life than the economy, but your concerns are noted there. Dunstan, Prof, very quickly, what is your take on the government's latest measures?
The measures, I think they were appropriate because the government is concerned with saving lives. But I think there are better way to protect the Kenyans from the impact of those measures. For example, unheightened enforcement of COVID protocols by the Ministry of Health would have helped. The curfew would have remained where it is, but the bars closed at 8. Enhancement of vaccinations, because I think there is a mistake we are making here. Our government, we know, doesn't have enough money to buy these vaccines, but if they allow the private sector to impose some vaccines, for example, Johnson & Johnson is obviously better than the one we're having from UK. The Russian vaccine has gotten a lot of praise from Turkey and South America. So expanding the space for vaccination would have been one way the government could have helped to fight this disease. I think there are certain things that could have been done that would have relieved the pain of the most vulnerable Kenyans, because the sectors that close, they are mainly occupied by really vulnerable people in this country. I think there is a way that could have done and reduced their pain. Believe me, if you go out there, you know what is happening to most affected people who work in these bars, hotels, and so on. So the measures were okay. We needed them because we need to protect our population from COVID. But then we need to think through how to alleviate the pain that is likely to come as a result of those measures.
All right. Mr. Kigame, have the final word for us tonight. We have seen various measures announced by the president on Friday being gradually effected. Even today, Parliament choosing to suspend sittings. That was part of the recommendation by the president. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So there are a couple of things regarding that order by the president that are okay. There are some that are not. So first of all, let me say, if you execute an order that citizens don't understand or cannot implement or are not sure how they will maneuver, you'll have an order that doesn't work. So, for example, in saying that the 5 counties are the most affected, so they are locked. Now, what happens to us in Eldoret, for example? There is quite a surge of cases here. Are we saying just move into Eldoret? You know, what is going to happen to Mombasa? By rule of thumb, last year they were affected. Why not lock up Mombasa as well? So that particular consideration, my question was, who really advised the president? And then secondly, the consequences of this very quick implementation of the order may cause a lot of losses of lives that are not, COVID related. So, for example, what is going to happen to the college students that were called to go back to college and then barely 2 months down the road, they're being told to go home? Some have paid rent and they are supposed to leave that money behind. Some were already starving because the previous situation had hit them hard. What do you do with them now that they'll be at home? When do they go back home? A lot of young people are disgruntled. Do they understand this executive order? No, they don't. Now, what about those who depend on these counties, to be able to get stuff, let's say, from Eldoret into Nairobi and vice versa, and cannot do business, and there is no stimulus package? What do you do for the Mama Mboga? What do you do for the Kinyozi man? What do you do? You know, there is just so much that leaves the ordinary mwananchi behind. Now, so my question would be, who is calling the shots? Did we learn from Uganda? Did the president maybe listen to Museveni, who did something similar last year? You know, midnight, we're locking up. The difference is that when Museveni did that, then he had the army and so on distributing relief to the citizens. Is that something that is being done here? No. So you can't implement only one aspect of advice from your friends. Now, but most important for me would be this.
Right.
We have so much of local resources. We have, for example, the Huduma number with all the information about citizens. We also have a lot of health workers whose safety was ignored. And so we are asking, here is a surge that is coming up. Are they able to believe enough in the system to then take care of us? But also the statistics. We already knew that there would be a surge in March. Why wouldn't we give citizens like 2 weeks? You know, say in 14 days we are locking up. You know, plan, now there's 7 days to go, there's 1 day to go. I think that would be better, even psychologically. Up to the time we are issuing this executive order, we have a lot of mental cases, you know, mental health situations. And mental health experts have come up and told us it's a time bomb. That's why people are killing each other and so on. So we saw what happened last year. What have we done? And like my colleague said earlier on, what about the stimulus package? What about those professionals whose salaries have been cut into half? What about our students that are in college, and in especially high schools? How will they travel home when they finally finish the exams? So all these things were not considered, and that's why the implementation was also piecemeal.
Thank you, sir. We have to leave it there, gentlemen. Many thanks for your time tonight and for your thoughts, for helping Kenyans. Just talk about this, what's happening. And the question we were seeking to answer is whether inadvertently the COVID pandemic is gradually stopping reggae. Thank you, gentlemen. Lawyer and political analyst Dunstan Omar, representative of the religious groups, and public policy analyst Ruben Kigame, joining us live from the county of Uasin Gishu, and Professor Kitili Naitule, governance expert.